Hello and welcome to episode number 169, where I speak with Freedom Cole about Jyotish or Vedic Astrology. We talk about the philosophy, the system of Jyotish, the difference between Vedic and Western astrology, and who it's for and how it works. Really interesting conversation, so please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. I will also discuss topics like yoga, which is the sister science of Ayurveda, health and wellness, nutrition, fitness, and mindfulness practices, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to help you to connect to each other. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend that you start by listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. Now, if you like the content, please subscribe to the show so the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. I've also set up a new private community away from social media on my new website, Elements Healing and Wellbeing. Now, this community provides a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, and to support each other. And I have many other perks in this community as well, so check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab in the menu. I hope you can join us. I'm looking forward to a lot more in-depth connection and conversation over there. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today I'm very happy to welcome Freedom Cole, who is a practitioner of Ayurveda, yoga therapy, and is a scholar-practitioner of Vedic Astrology. Freedom has spent extensive time in India training in traditional healing modalities and teaches a Jyotish lineage, which traces back to the royal counselors of Odisha. Freedom is the author of 2 books and numerous articles. He is faculty in the Ayurveda and mental health modules of the Kripalu Integrative Yoga Therapy Program and teaches Jyotish internationally through his Science of Light programs. Freedom, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
A pleasure to be with you.
Great. And we were just reminiscing how we met in person at the NAMA conference that was back in 2019 in California,
yes.
Right?
Yes, when we still had in-person event.
I know, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because as I mentioned to you, we haven't discussed Vedic astrology at all on the podcast yet, and it has been a much requested episode. So I'd like to start there, Freedom. I'd like to start with what is Vedic astrology? If it could give us a 101 as we start this conversation, that would be fab.
Well, just first with the terminology, Vedic astrology, it's a relatively new term. The Sanskrit word is Jyotish. And when we translate it as Vedic astrology, it would be the same as translating yoga as Indian exercise or Vedic exercise. Or if we translate it Ayurveda as Vedic medicine, Vedic herbology.
Okay.
If we translate Ayurveda as Vedic herbology, we would lose, it doesn't fully encompass it.
Right.
But Vedic astrology makes it so that it lands a little bit better. People have a sense of the primary tools that are being used because we are primarily using planets, stars, houses, similar to a Western astrological system. But Vedic astrology is the system that was used by the guides and counselors and therapists and certain particular types of Vedyas. But it was this tool to help guide life in the right direction.
Okay. And so was it part of the Vedic text?
So it depends what you mean by Vedic texts. So with Vedic texts, we have Vedic Samhitas, we have Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, and then we have a whole host of, Ayurvedic texts, Dharma Shastra texts, and there was a line of calendrical texts that looked at the time and kept the time in the ancient Vedic world. And in keeping that time, there was also there was a person just like a doctor takes care of people. There was a person whose job was to take care of time and to say what the good times and bad times were. And through that, we see this development of Sanskrit texts that teach this astrological system that is clearly very different than the Western system.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about what are the differences between Jyotish and Western astrology?
And so when we say Western astrology, we can also divide that into two realms. There's modern Western astrology, and then there's what these days they're calling Hellenistic astrology, which is a traditional astrology. And the Hellenistic or traditional Western astrology has a lot in common, similar to the ancient Greek medical system also had 4 humors, similar to Ayurveda. Ayurveda uses 3 humors. Greek medicine used 4, but they had the same idea of treatment by balancing, removing excess, things of that nature. When we get to the modern astrology, there was, after the European removal of the ancient ways, there was a renaissance. And so a lot of astrology was brought back and different techniques were brought back. But when we look at the Hellenistic, which is the most similar to the Vedic system, and there's a lot of wonderful Hellenistic astrologers out there now. One of the main differences is the Vedic system. It's a living system that has been passed down for generations. And so, like I myself, my teacher studied from his uncle, who studied from my teacher's grandfather, who studied from his father. And literally they talk about when they moved in the 1500s to the village that their family's from. And before that in the 800s when they moved to, so it's hundreds of years of tradition supporting the teachings. Wow. One of the big differences that a lot of people focus on is the Vedic system uses a calculation called sidereal, which means they pay close attention to the actual star positions. When we look at the Western system, it's a little bit more of a seasonal zodiac. They don't care as much about where the stars are. Even though they use star names, they care more about the seasonal positioning of the planets.
Okay.
So in the Western system, when you say Aries, you don't actually mean the stars of Aries. You mean the first month after the spring equinox.
Okay, I see. Okay, very interesting.
And as we know from Ayurveda, the seasons have a huge impact on us, not just physiologically, but also psychologically.
Right.
And so the Western system, the Hellenistic and the modern, are both using what's called a tropical zodiac. They're using more a seasonal approach, where the Vedic is using, we already have Ayurveda totally taking into account the seasons. We're taking this bigger picture and really putting a lot of attention to the stars and the karma connected to those stars.
Okay, very interesting. And I'd like to kind of follow that trail. And if you could talk to us a little bit about the system or the components of Jyotish.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yes. So So on the surface, we have planets, stars, positions in the sky, and how those are all interacting. But how we understand how they're interacting is the 5 elements and the 3 gunas.
Okay.
And so everything is a relationship, a combination, a coming together of a quantitative amount of these 5 elements and the 3 gunas. So, for example, if we just digging deeper into that, and being that this is an most of your listeners are into the realm of Ayurveda.
Absolutely.
In Ayurveda, we have a concept of sattva. Now, when we go into the realm of Jyotish, there are 3 sattvic planets, and each of those gives a different quality of sattva. So we have the sattva of the sun. And the sattva of the sun is this inherent sense of self, this integrity of who you are, and this ability to maintain balance by knowing what you are, who you are in the world. Then we look at the moon, and the moon is also a sattvic planet. But the sattva of that is more of a feeling. It's that emotional relating. It's relating to things in the right way, that ability to listen, to be present for, and the sattva that is cultivated by that emotional presence and awareness. And then we have a 3rd planet, which is Jupiter. And Jupiter is very much connected to the prefrontal cortex cognitive functions. So it's making decisions, it's weighing things, it's determining, is this going to be good or bad for me? And it really makes us consider things before we do things, and from this much bigger perspective. And so whether we have, and so Jupiter represents the sattva that is maintained by that function of us. So when we say, is somebody sattvic, sometimes just from the Ayurvedic perspective, we don't have the terminology to really differentiate at that fine tune of a detail. But because we're looking much more at that level from a Jyotish perspective, we can see where is it that somebody is falling from sattva, and what is the components that we need to work on and cultivate deeper for sattva to be more functioning and more easily sustainable in our life. So I'm looking at the planets in this. I just brought up the sattva. Then there's also tamas planets and rajas planets, wow. And each of those is taking on these different functions inside of us. And so that's one component of the planets, and that was me just looking at the gunas. The planets also have elements, and so we take a whole direction in that way. The realm where the Jyotish steps up a little bit more than what we learn in Ayurveda is it brings in this archetypal realm, this realm of what things represent. And I'll just give an example. Let's see, the bone in the body is also connected to the sun. And again, the sun is this sense of self, it's self-confidence, it's the belief that I can do things. And often when there's bone issues, asti dhatu disturbance, there's a disturbance in confidence, there's a disturbance in the sense of self, there's a disturbance in your ability to believe in yourself, there might be issues with shame. We get to this archetypal level where we're not just looking at the physical, but we're taking on what is it in the person, what is it that they believe or are feeling, or what experience happened to them that is creating this weakness in a certain dhatu that is creating a physical level of disturbance.
Oh.
And we get to, you could almost say, see the story behind where the different weaknesses might be in the body and why there would be ill health. So let's see. So the planets as elements, as gunas, as archetypes. Similarly, the signs or the stars we look at, and they kind of give us the flavor. It's a planet, and I'm using lots of Ayurvedic analogies, but a food has a quality, and then a constitution has a quality. And certain foods go well with certain constitutions and not with others. And in a similar way, certain planets do well with certain stars and do not well with other stars.
Okay.
And so it's not about being good or bad, but it's all about the right thing for the right person. And so the planets give good effects in certain areas and not good effects in other areas. And one of our goals is through lifestyle, through mantra, through choices in life, making sure that we are just like in Ayurveda, making sure we eat the right foods and have the proper diet and whatever supporting herbs we need. We're making sure that we are living in the right way, doing the careers that are most supportive of who we are, marrying the people that are going to be most compatible with us, things of that nature.
Wow, fascinating, and such detail.
Because I do Ayurveda and yoga therapy and Jyotish, and Jyotish is really the most complex.
Fascinating. So how does it start, Freedom? If I came to you for a do you say a reading? A Jyotish reading, or how do you?
Some people use reading. I like to use the word consultation myself.
Okay. So if I came to you for consultation, and now I haven't done, not yet, a Jyotish consultation. I definitely want to do one, but I have, had some Western astrological readings. I provide my time, place, and date of birth. What is it you require from a person if you are to have a consultation?
So that is the primary three things we utilize is the place of birth, time of place, date and time, and that time becomes very important.
Okay.
That shows what the situation in the sky is at the moment, and that's something we should talk about. So why do I care about what the sky looks like at the moment? And
at the moment I was born, correct?
At the moment you were born,
okay.
Exactly. And we just as what time of year it is going to be impacting your constitution, because there is no, the environment is directly impacting you. You're not separate from the environment from an Ayurvedic perspective. Similarly, the stars of the sky are creating a certain pattern of energy. And this patterning, this qualitative energy of time is imprinting. It's creating a certain nature. Okay. And so we aren't different than the time that we are in. Just as we are not, we can't say that we're separate from the environment that we're in. Everything in the environment impacts us. And if we take that to a macro level, even the position of where we are in the solar system and where everything else is in the solar system at the moment of birth is impacting us and indicating the nature of what we're going to be experiencing in this life. So the time is giving me that final detail. So I myself, when I do a consultation, because if I took your data and we wanted to have a conversation, I could probably talk for about 10 hours about what's there. So the thing is, we want to limit to what's pertinent to you, what's happening right now. And so I always ask people, like, what is your intention? What are you planning? What do you want to get out of your time with me?
Right.
That way we go a little bit more into that. Though when I do look at a chart, I will basically the first thing I do is I do something called rectification, which means I make sure that I have the right time. And this will give you the detail, but when they wrote the time down, did they take the time from when your head came out, from when your whole body came out, or from your first cry? Wow. And sometimes those can be a few minutes apart. Sometimes they're really close together. And then was somebody with a watch looking exactly, or did they wait till they cleaned you up and washed their hands to look at the time?
Right.
So we get this variety, and often we are, with our calculations, we're moving 3 or 4 minutes back, 5 or 6 minutes ahead, in where there's often just a little bit of variation that might be there. And it'll be variation of, well, if it's 3 minutes ahead, you will be somebody who's very mathematical and good with computers and things of that nature. If you're this much minutes this way, then you're somebody who's very artistic, loves to read, and knows multiple languages. And we have these, and then it's like, well, which one is me? And it's normally pretty clear.
Okay.
And so first thing me and the students that train with me do is we make sure that time is accurate. Yeah. Because if you ask a question, should I take this job or should I take that job? I'm going to be looking at what's going to support your skill set the most.
Right. Yeah,
and so I need to,
Yeah, you need to make sure, because like you said, if it's a few minutes either way, it can make a big difference.
Big difference from the Vedic perspective. Right. And that's a level of detail you don't find many Western astrologers getting into. And so the next thing I would do is I go into what in Ayurveda we call Kavai Gunya. Where if there's a disease, is that disease going to come out? And I'll talk about what that weakness is and what can we do to fix that. And often, and I'd say almost 80 to 90% of the time, whatever the person wanted to focus on will relate to whatever that Kavai Gunya is. And Kavai Gunya is not just, in Ayurveda, it's just an organ in the body, but from an Jyotish perspective, is the realm of relationship the weak area of my life? Is career the weak area of my life? Is health the weak area of my life? And if it is health, which part of my body is it? And then I generally will go into a realm of, so what is the greatest strengths and what can we do to support those strengths and make your life most successful based on those strengths.
So are you bringing your knowledge as an Ayurvedic practitioner and yoga therapist into these sessions as well?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And, I've been in practice over 20 years. And in the beginning, I had, I just did readings for anybody. As now that I have a 3-month waiting list, I get to pick who I want. And I really focus much more on physical and mental health issues. At this point in my practice, I avoid doing the more business astrology. Though if a person's career is falling apart, I'll support them in remedies for that. But there's people who just go to astrologers for stock market predictions. Right. And I don't go down that route. I'm primarily in the medical astrology realm. Oh, fascinating. And the yoga therapy, I got really into the yoga therapy a number of years ago when I realized that what I'd learned from my Jyotish teacher of these remedies for these different problems, of different pranayams and different meditations and different mantras and all that, really they didn't, that's not what people, when I say astrology, you don't think that you're going to come and I'm going to give you a specific dharana meditation. Right. Yeah. And it's not it's not how we associate it because we're calling it Vedic astrology and not Jyotish. Similarly, if somebody came to an Indian herbalist, they would be a little surprised if they had to do a panchakarma because they'd be expecting just to have herbs.
Right. You said Vedic astrology, that terminology is not doing it justice.
Not doing it justice. So there's a large amount of different, and when I say yoga, mostly pranayama, meditations, mantras, things of that nature. It's not as much focused on asana, except there's a few things like depression and anxiety. There's certain postural preferences that are ideal for supporting. But yes, so all of that is integrated. And with my students, some of them are farther along than others. So some of them are just doing the astrological prediction element, and some are integrating the mantras, and some are integrating the meditations, and to really integrate the Ayurveda takes a full and separate study of Ayurveda to be able to integrate.
Yeah, but such a fascinating skill set you have to bring in yoga therapy, Ayurveda, and Jyotish together. That's amazing. And Freedom, you mentioned earlier about karma and how it really, a consultation determines our experience. And I realize this might be a very big question. So, yes. Is our karma determined by the alignment of the planets and the stars on our birth date?
And so it's more goes the other direction. Based upon your karma, you're going to be born at a certain time, and you'll be born at a certain time that will allow certain karmas to fructify. Okay. And there's certain like, for example, there's certain combinations that show that a person will have a water birth. Certain combinations that show the person is born on the way to the hospital. Oh, wow. Certain combinations like this that can show the circumstance of birth. If somebody is born and their mother is on a lot of is very heavily sedated and a lot of surgical operations, that'll show up in the chart. Oh my goodness. And so the thing is, it shows up because that individual Atma had a certain window that their nature of that Atma was meant to come in, because that's who they are.
Oh, I love that it was the other way around, and the soul chose to come in at that time.
Well, it's just when it fits. Right. It's like flowers bloom in the springtime. And they spring in the spring, they bloom, they grow and bloom because that is their nature. And so at the right time, the thing that is supposed to be there comes forth.
I hope you're enjoying this discussion with Freedom on Jyotish. Such interesting information. And I want to let you know, if you're interested in continuing the discussion on these podcast episodes, I have set up a new private community for the podcast, the Elements of Ayurveda community, on my new website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. I'm moving away from the social media groups, which I found didn't provide that safe space. And so I created this new private community. And I really want this to be a place where we can continue on the discussions from these podcast episodes. You can voice your thoughts, your comments, your feedback, ask questions, and also share inspirational information with others who are like-minded within this private community. You get early access to the weekly podcast episodes. I'm going to have monthly office hours where I can answer your questions live. And we're going to have regular group challenges to help us keep up with our Ayurvedic and yogic lifestyle, keep us mindful and accountable. You'll also have your input on topics for future podcast episodes or for Q&A episodes. And of course, I'll be in there regularly sharing tips and advice. So if you're interested in being part of this private community, please check out the link in the show notes or go to my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. Okay, let's go back to my discussion with Freedom. And so that kind of takes us into the philosophy of Jyotish. Can you talk to us a little bit about the philosophy?
So that's one of my areas that I love greatly and write a lot about. It's a huge topic that we could spend hours and hours and hours, and different perspectives we can also approach it from. But if we look from the Ayurvedic lens, if we stand as an Ayurvedic practitioner looking at Jyotish, and what does Ayurveda itself? What are they holding, and how are they holding Jyotish? We have two terms that we see used in the Brihatrayi, and the two terms are karma-ja, roga, which ja means from, to be born from. And so karma-ja means roga, disease that is born from karma. So Charaka talks to us about karma-ja roga, disease born from karma, and he talks to us about daiva. And daiva is more, because when we say when we say karma, it has this bigger sense of what, because I did something in a past life, this is what's going to happen to me now. And Charaka's, he uses the word daiva for this. And one of the Charaka makes a statement. He says, if you're eating all the right foods, you're doing the right seasonal procedures, you're living according to all the standards, and you still get sick, then it's karma-ja. That person who there's no reason it should have happened, or the teenager who gets a disease, who gets a cancer that a teenager doesn't get cancer. This is karma-ja. And so there's certain issues that happen in life because of karma. And we can't treat them with physical methodologies. We need to go into what Charaka calls daiva chikitsa, meaning treatment of daiva. And the treatment of daiva, Charaka gives a long list, and he says mantras, fasting, spiritual, and he lists this whole list of spiritual procedures. And he just leaves it there. He doesn't tell you how to use which of them when, because he's assuming that you go to somebody who does Jyotish, who will be able to do the karma-ja roga diagnosis to be treating this. So that's just a little lens from the Ayurvedic perspective. And if we look, that daiva chikitsa is in the realm of three types of treatment. We have kaya chikitsa, treatment of the body. We have the sattva vijaya, which is the treatment of the mind. And then we have the daiva chikitsa, which is the treatment of our karma. And this goes back to a concept of the Tri Sharira, the three body system, that we're a physical body, that we have an emotional, mental body, and people often say spiritual body. And it's almost a little bit more of a culturalism to say spirit. We say body, mind, spirit. But if we look to the classical Vedic world, it's physical, mental, and they use the word karana, or causal. This place that's holding my karma, that is causing, why is it that one of us has red hair, one of us balds at a certain age, one of us has dark skin, one of us, there's this causal body is creating the shape of who we are. It's creating the shape of what our life is. It's that causal body is what determines why is it that when people have children, you might have a person who loves studying music, and then they have a child who doesn't want to have anything to do with music. And then someone else, they're not in the music at all, and to them they have this child who's just a music prodigy.
Right.
This music prodigy, this something caused that. And that cause was carried by the karmas that are residing within the causal body. So if we were really accurate, we would say body, mind, and causal, body, mind, and karma. Because that's what we are actually treating.
Right.
So we have the three bodies. The karna is where the karmas are stored. They're shaping things. And they're shaping things from a very subtle level of reality. And thereby the remedial measures to them are, again, very subtle. I'll often use donation for certain issues. We can see that there was a certain karma in the past life that is creating a certain suffering now. So if we can donate to something that improves the situation of the people that we might have hurt in our last life, we're thereby clearing that karma in the present.
Fascinating.
Or we have, or there's mantras and all kinds of other remedies there that we...
So is part of the philosophy to work on the causal body?
All Jyotish remedies are, well, I can't say all, because sometimes, somebody comes with an issue, and with the Jyotish, we can also see this is just a physical situation. You just sprained your ankle. It's not something more. It's, or did you sprain your ankle because there's this feeling of being unsupported because your mother wasn't there for you?
Right.
And so we differentiate that. But if it is karna based, then all the mantra remedies and things of that nature are working on that karmic body. When we enter the realm of Jyotish, and it's one of the things, the Vedic people were such pragmatists, if you look at Ayurveda, it doesn't say why we were created. It just says, this is how it's working. Okay. This is how we make it work well. And the purpose of making it work well is the four aims of life. Similarly, from the Vedic astrology perspective, our goal is to make it so that a person is successfully leading the four aims of life.
Very good.
And just similar to, it's very pragmatic. It says how karma works. It shows, it shows us how to read karma, how karma works, and what do we need to do to treat it.
Okay. As an Ayurveda is giving us guidelines.
Yeah. And when that big question of why, why are we here? It doesn't answer that, and it doesn't go there, and it intentionally doesn't go there because it's, as soon as you go there, you get into, Samkhya Pramana. Can you prove it? Is there proof? Is this valid? Right. And when we start making reasons for the universe and reasons why, and is there this greater purpose, we get into this more faith realm of a concept that we have to believe in. The astrology itself, sometimes people say, I don't believe in astrology, and I think it's kind of funny. It's kind of like somebody saying, I don't believe in the seasons. Right. I don't believe in sleep. It's like, you don't have to believe in sleep, but you still need to get it. And so the astrology, it's just showing us what the karma is and how to work with it.
And how did you get into this science of Jyotish?
So, my mother had a yoga studio, and so I grew up with yoga and yoga and meditation, and I met Baba Hari Das when I was young and was studying, and he introduced me to Ayurveda. And so I started studying Ayurveda. I went to what at that time was the New England Institute of Ayurvedic Medicine, right outside of Boston. Yeah. And one of the modules was Jyotish, and it was medical astrology, and it was a weekend only. And but I basically saw that, and I realized a Western doctor has an MRI and an X-ray. And so if something's broken or wrong, they have this thing that that kind of gives them the inside scoop of what it is. And, I like the MRI concept because sometimes people put too much emphasis on the power of Jyotish. It's an MRI. It lets us see what's going on. A doctor can see this deeper thing going on. It doesn't mean it's going to make it better. Right. It doesn't mean the doctor is going to be able to treat it. But it gives the ability for the doctor, if the doctor knows how, to be able to start treating what he sees based upon this MRI, and it gives him a precision of knowing. And so similarly, when I learned Jyotish, I was like, how can I do Ayurveda without the X-ray / MRI to be able to get this deeper realm?
Yeah.
And then it just ate me alive. I just started studying everything I could, and next thing I knew, I'm where I am. So
from what you're explaining today, such a depth of knowledge, so much deeper, and such a holistic view of a person.
Yes. My goal was to get, just when you set the intention for the world, I was like, I want to understand well-being. I want to understand health. I want to understand how humans work. And the universe led me to Jyotish. So.
Wow, amazing. And so who would you say Jyotish is for? You mentioned this earlier, that people who work with Jyotish are focusing on different areas.
Yes.
But why or when should a person get a Jyotish consultation?
So there are people who, I would compare it to Ayurveda. And with Ayurveda, when you have certain diseases, you have to go see an Ayurvedic practitioner. You can go take an allopathic medicine that just makes it so that you don't have to experience the symptoms, but then it'll just push the issue deeper. And by, when there's health issues, being able to see an Ayurvedic person who can kind of holistically put things in balance allows you to not have problems later on. Similarly, making big life changes, making big decisions about your life, determining maybe what type of, if you do mantras or spiritual practice in the morning, making sure that, or in the evening or whenever that's done, making sure that that is balancing you. And sometimes we have difficulties in life and we just put patches on it and we keep going. And all that's going to do is continue to build up and make a larger problem later down the road. And so when we start having little bumps in our life, it's ideal to find a Vedic astrologer that resonates with you, that you can start consulting and being able to start guiding life in certain directions. And thereby there's going to be the 4 aims of life are going to be more achievable and more easily achievable.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can you explain the 4 aims of life for people who are not, I did cover it in the podcast episode before, but just quickly, if you could cover those in case someone's wondering. So
Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And so I'll break them each down, and and maybe we could even at some point do a whole podcast just on that and the chart. Yes, that'd be amazing. Because there's 3 houses, there's 12 signs, and 3 of them each go to each of the 4 aims of life. And so when we look at Dharma, we're looking at what is a person doing? What is their what is their, and that purpose? What is their nature supposed to be doing in this life to be fulfilled? Artha, we have to have enough money to do the things that we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes people get this spiritual concept where money is not good. The Vedic prayer says, give me more money so I can be more spiritual. Give me more money so I have more time to worship and meditate and all of this. So there's no fear of financial success. Our goal is to make there be financial success. That way we can achieve everything else. Dharma is easier to achieve if you have the financial means. Then we have Kama, which is our love life, our relationship life, relationship between the partner, both on an intimate level and on a relational level, as well as relationship between family members falls under Kama. So making sure that this area of life is healthy. And then when we go to the realm of moksha, we're making sure that a person is on a spiritual path that is compatible for them. And so our goal is to make sure that all four of these are equally in balance. And there can be weakness in one of these areas or two of these areas. And our goal is to make sure that we're not getting weakness in any of that. Because from a Jyotish perspective, that is karmic illness is not just physical illness. Karmic illness from the Jyotish perspective is your career not working? Are you not being fulfilled with what you're doing in life? Are you not able to make a relationship work? Are you not not resonating with your spiritual path and not getting results? This is karmic disease from a Jyotish perspective.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you for sharing those four aims of life. And definitely, I'd like to have another podcast episode where we get more into that. That would be wonderful. So how would a person go about finding a Jyotish counselor? How would is there a database?
Database. I wish there was a good database. That would be a nice thing. There is one similar to Nama in the Ayurvedic world called the Council of Vedic Astrology, but Nama has kind of reached a certain level of acceptance. The Council of Vedic Astrology doesn't have that same acceptance. So there's a lot of good astrologers that are not registered through the Council of Vedic Astrology. They do have a website where they do list practitioners. I think similar in the Ayurvedic world, it's a lot more about looking at who a person has studied with, where did they study, who have they studied, how long have they been studying.
Right, exactly. Okay,
great. And it takes some research. To me, I always recommend that people try and find somebody who resonates with we have different tribes, you could say. And really somebody that you meet them and you're like, this is somebody who understands my way of life, my way of being, and they're properly trained. In Ayurveda, it doesn't matter if they're your tribe at the same level, because we're on just this physical level. But when we get into somebody who's giving us advice about our life, there is the technical side, and then there's who that technical side is coming through.
Right.
We want somebody that meets us as who we are, and we want somebody properly trained. And sometimes you have to get 2 or 3 readings before you find that person that you're like, this is a person that I can trust to help me make these big decisions.
Wonderful. Okay, that's great advice. Thank you for that, Freedom. And as we finish up here, can you tell us more about your programs, your Science of Light programs, where people can find out more about you and your offerings?
Yes. So for the Jyotish realm, I have a website called scienceoflight.net. And I have 2 books and tons of articles and YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. So people can check me out and listen to stuff and hear all that. I have a 6-week course that my advanced students teach, that for people who this is all very new to them, can have somebody very closely guide you to look at your chart and understand what this is, so that you can understand the components that an astrologer uses. Then we have a level 1 and a level 2 course that each run 10 months. And they basically do the fundamentals. And my program is geared for somebody who wants to integrate the practice of to be a professional astrologer, or to be an Ayurvedic practitioner who is getting insight with Jyotish, a yoga therapist who is getting insight with Jyotish, psychologists who are using it. I have a lot of psychologists who take my programs.
Oh, great.
So it's really meant that those 2-year programs are meant for professional practice, to get somebody into that realm. Then there's a 5-year program that literally happens. It's 5 years long, so you get into it at a certain point, and that it's less about professional practice, and it's more about getting into the details of each of the concepts and really understanding them in a deeper way.
Okay, lots of great offers there and great different levels, which is fantastic.
Yes. And one of the things about my programs and everything of that nature is I come from a tradition that comes from India. And so studying with me kind of opens up a whole doorway to a handful of Indian teachers and teachers around the world who are studying a specific tradition of Jyotish from the eastern part of India.
Wonderful. That's lovely. Well, Freedom, thank you so much. I'm going to put all those links in the show notes for everybody. So if you didn't catch them, just head on over to the show notes and I'll put all the links there. But I really enjoyed this conversation. As I said to you earlier, I've attended a couple of talks on Jyotish, but still not very familiar with it. So this really explained a lot today. And I'd love to have you back again because I think there's so much more to discuss, and this was just an intro to Jyotish. But thank you so much for taking the time, and I really enjoyed chatting with you today.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Freedom, and please check out the show notes for a link to Freedom's website, thescienceoflight.net. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this wisdom of Jyotish and Ayurveda throughout the world. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. And if you wish, rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. I would truly appreciate that. Don't forget to join the Elements of Ayurveda private community on my new website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And if you're interested in my online services, whether it's my consultations, my at-home digestive reset cleanse, or my educational programs, you can click on the link in the show notes. And I also offer a free 15-minute Services Enquiry call if you have questions before you book. So please take advantage of that, and I hope to connect with you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.